Then it would be 2 chest isolation exercises and 2 tricep and 2 shoulder isolation exercises. So total of around 4, 8, 12 working sets, potentially a little bit more.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to Think Big Bodybuilding Media. I'm Scott McNally, and we are back again with Kuba Cielen. What's going on, brother?
I am very excited for today's conversation as we've got some epic topics to talk about. I think we've warmed up already before the podcast, and I'm very, very happy to be here and excited to get stuck in. And if there's anybody that obviously has any questions at the end, we'll happily take them. But we've got some juicy, quite literally juicy topics to talk about today. We're going to start off with some physique assessments and structuring the best training plan for you to get massive. So we're going to go ahead with that one first, and then we'll see what else we have on the schedule that we can fit in. But some juicy subjects that I want to touch on as well, which is some of the craziest cycles that I have seen or have been potentially suggested by coaches in past. And I know people like to know the juicy details and get an insight on that, so I will definitely happily share that. And just a bit of a FYI, I did not do that cycle. So I'm going to share the cycle, guys. Be patient. But I'm just going to get out there first. I did not do that cycle. If I did, I probably would not be sat here. I would probably still be in a jail cell somewhere.
Oh, God. So, or worse, man. You might not be with us. Who knows?
Yeah.
All right.
I'm probably playing golf by now, or taking up golf, yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited to get to that, man. And like you said, if you guys have any questions, feel free to post them up. I'll dive straight into some pictures here. I've got a good friend of the program, good friend of mine, Tommy Stiles, sent us in some pictures. And Kuba, overall, dude, we got some pretty good physiques here that guys have sent us. So let me just get some shots up of Tommy. Man, I've watched Tommy make some incredible progress over the past several years. Get some more shots of him here. So what are we doing here exactly? We're looking at his pictures, and what's the goal with these?
So I want to go over a bit of physique analysis. Look, we're not here to criticize people too much. We want to be as constructive as possible. So I want to assess these guys' physiques and be like, right, this is what I personally think you need in order to be more competitive for your class. And potentially this is what I would suggest in terms of what you could do in terms of designing the best training split for you. Now, I want to go over some steps that people need to take in consideration when it comes to designing a training split or a training program, whatever you want to call it, fucking mesocycle, whatever cycle you want to call it, right? Some steps that I want people to consider and think about before you actually design a program for someone. I think first, you need to have a physique analysis for that athlete and for the category that he wants to compete in. How you will structure training for your men's physique competitor versus open pro bodybuilder will vary massively. Now, you also need to take in the competitor's preference.
Yeah.
And by preference, it might be a split that they really like, and you might need to work from that and modify that to a degree. Also, you need to take consideration someone's daily structure, daily life, and their responsibilities as a whole. Not everyone is able to have a flexible training split or a rolling training program. So you do need to take consideration their needs and wants based around that. So once you have all that noted down, then you can have a bit of a physique assessment, you assess someone's physique, and then you can work from that, because you need to ideally design a split for someone that they are going to enjoy. They need to enjoy the training program. If someone enjoys it, and on paper it might not be the best training program, if someone enjoys it and someone is excited to do it, they will perform better and they will progress more. But there has to be a middle ground where you are giving your athlete just enough enjoyment to keep them motivated and driven, but with specificity and targeting their needs as well. What's your thoughts on that, Scott?
I agree 100%, man. I really don't have a lot to add other than there was a time that I didn't take into account the enjoyment factor. What are your preferences? And I just felt like, hey, if My preference is to get as big as possible at the time. I'm going to do whatever that takes. But you know what? Not everybody's ready to make certain changes to their plans just because it's just how we are. So you can, if you're a coach, you can only work with what somebody is ready for and do the best that you can do given that, you know.
I agree. I think it varies as well. If you're working with a professional athlete, generally, if you're working with a top-end pro, they are not going to care what food you give them,
right,
or what training you give them. All they care about is results. And I understand that psychology, but if you can have a conversation with your athlete and say, what is it that makes you tick? What is it that gets you in the gym and really gets you fired up? If you can incorporate a little bit of that whilst not necessarily putting them or exposing them to a massive risk of getting injured,
yeah,
I think that just ticks so many boxes when it comes to programming. Even if someone is adamant they want to do a certain lift, you can always use a variation of that lift that will be productive for them.
I agree. Let's dive into these pictures. Get this thing rolling, man.
Let's do it.
Bring Tommy back up here. And he sent us a bunch of shots. So if you want any other ones, I can grab those. But here's a front rear relaxed. And then I had that front double bicep too. It was a good shot to add in here. And, we could throw in anything else you want. So you say it.
Have you got his quarter turns as well? Now we've seen these 3 shots, maybe just having a look at some quarter turns as well. And what he looks like in a side chest and, side chest, side tricep, and back double bicep. Let's see those.
Let's see. All right, here's side tricep. It doesn't look like we have quarter turns. People sent us very limited pictures in general, but Tommy did send us a slew. There's the side tricep. Here's the side chest. And let's see what else we have here. And what else did you want to see? Rear double?
Back double bicep, yes, please, yeah.
All right, here it is.
I want to see how this flows. Right.
And here is the rear double.
Yeah. Right, so let's go over some strong points in his physique. First thing that really stands out, he does have a pretty thick back. However, I would like to see some more lower lat development. For someone like him, he's literally built for a deadlift. So I can imagine he can probably deadlift a lot of weight. And this is me. I've never seen Johnny train, so I cannot comment, but that's just a guess.
Yeah.
His shoulders are very, very big. What I would like to see more from him, personally, I'd like to see a little bit more glute development, lower lats, arms, and definitely chest focus. That would definitely go a long way. And I would definitely like to see his hamstrings pop just a little bit more, and overall size obviously would be needed here, but with a degree of specificity to bring up his chest, bring up his arms, lower body thickness, I think glutes, hamstring from the back especially, and obviously his sweep on the quads could come up. But again, you cannot pinpoint where your leg's going to get thicker to a degree due to insertions, etc. But there is certain movements that you can incorporate that will slightly target that certain area a little bit more. So again, the training split, what I would probably like to see Johnny do is a modified push-pull legs with potentially an arm day added in. So the way I would structure it would be a push day, a pull day with hamstring work. The push day that he does would be push and arms. Then it would be back and hamstrings. The back work would be heavily focused on lats. And then we would sprinkle probably a hip hinge movement in, as I can probably guess he enjoys it. And you would have no arm work on that day. So it'd be push and arms. Then it would be back and hamstrings. Rest. Then I would actually give him an upper body session where he does touch his chest again. And then he does more arm work and a little bit more lat work again. And then follow that up with a leg day.
Okay.
So 2 days on, 1 day off. And it would be push and arms, back and hamstrings, rest. Then it would be an upper body day, legs, rest. And the way I would structure that would be push day, number 1. You would start with chest work. I would probably want to see 6 total sets of chest. I would not actually want to see any direct work that's above the head. Because his front delt is especially so developed, I would probably want to see starting him off where cable fly to begin with, just so he can develop a really good connection with his chest before he's pressing. So I would probably start him off with like a variation of an incline fly. Then we would go into a flat press, and then probably finish off on like an incline press of some sort. You could even flip it round. Incline fly or flat fly, incline press, and a flat press to finish off on.
Yeah.
Then I would go into a tricep compound movement, which is going to tie in some pecs. So I would actually opt for a dip variation in that instance, because a dip is going to train his lower pecs and tricep.
I like that.
Isolation tricep exercise, and then I would go with 2 bicep exercises.
Okay.
So you're looking at 6 sets for chest. You're looking at 6 sets for tricep and 6 sets for bicep. Which is, on paper, it looks like a lot of work, right?
Yeah.
But when you compare 6 sets of just tricep work or 6 sets of just bicep work, it's not really that demanding, is it?
That's true. Yeah. Like it's not nearly as, any back work, any chest work, leg work. That's so much more demanding.
Right. So I would opt to spread the volume for training with the arms across 2 exercises. So it would be 2 tricep exercises. It would be a dip variation. And I would probably go with like a single arm overhead variation just for the long head of the tricep.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people miss a trick with targeting the long head of the tricep with the tricep exercises. And then I would finish off on like a single arm preacher bicep curl, and then potentially on a cable variation, facing away from the cables, adjusting the cables a little bit higher, just so it's a little bit heavy on the stretch. That is the only exercise I would do. So it would be 1, 2, 3 exercises for chest. Then it would be 2 exercises for tricep, 2 exercises for bicep.
Okay. I like that.
Then we're going to this pull day. I'd do 4 sets of lats spread across 2 exercises, 1 set of a chest supported upper back row, which again, that will target the entire back, right? So 6 sets total for his back work, and then 4 sets for hamstrings. And I would tie that in with a hip hinge movement, 2 working sets, super strict, and a leg curl variation for 2 working sets.
Okay, nice.
So this session is a little bit less volume because every single movement is a lot more demanding.
Yeah.
Upper body session. This is where I would actually start off with bicep work. So I would go in with 3 working sets of bicep. Yeah. 3 working sets of biceps, 3 working sets of chest, and I would not actually do any compound work for chest. In that session, I would probably stick to something like a pec fly variation, because you do not want to have that much demand on connective tissue with the frequency being higher for his chest work.
Yeah, okay.
So 3 sets of bicep, 3 sets of chest. This session is where I would actually do some lateral work. 3 sets of laterals, and then 3 sets of tricep to finish off on.
Okay.
12 working sets. And then you've got 2 sets of actual direct lat work. And for the lat work on the upper body session, because he just did the pull day 2 days before, I would actually incorporate something like a pullover. So nothing that's going to be super demanding. It's going to be pretty good in the stretch, but with either a cable pullover or a machine pullover, again, not that demanding. You can work in slightly higher rep ranges. It's not going to necessarily have a huge recovery demand, but you can still have some good quality volume in place.
Yeah.
And then the leg day, that is when I would let it rip. I would definitely go with something like 4 to 6 sets of direct work for quads, a mixture of a squat compound, leg extension, a leg press, and then 4 working sets of hamstring work, taking out to 10 working sets for quads and hams, and then 2 sets of calves to finish off on as well. I think his calves, looking at back his pictures, are not really a weakness, so I wouldn't really waste energy and time adding more calf work unless it was super necessary. So, Johnny, that is a free training program for you, my friend, to not only get massive, but also have a sprinkle of specificity towards your lagging body parts that need to come up a little bit more. So, looking back on this, the volume allocation, so how we have spread out the sets across the weeks, we have lowered the sets of direct work for his strong areas and increased the working sets for his weaker areas. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense.
And in his instance, I can probably imagine the strong areas like his shoulders, they will probably grow off the bare minimum.
Yeah, absolutely.
So he probably doesn't need extra work there. However, his weaker areas, we can afford for a little bit more work, and lowering the volume from his strong areas, that actually leaves more time, more recoverability for him to be able to do that, recover and progress.
Yes. Yeah, you can't hit everything with 110%. I always use the analogy of like a glass of water, being that whatever we do, if you take a guy, and then the one I always think of is the guy who comes to you who has incredible legs and no upper body. And when you ask him about his training, he says, oh man, I just love leg day. And he's spending these 2-3 hour leg days and not giving that same intensity to upper body. Well, you're probably like zapping 30, 40, maybe even more % of your entire. So every time you train, you're using some of your recovery. You only have so much to go around. So I get what you're saying. If you're smashing, say in his case, his shoulders, putting a lot of effort into that, some of that recoverability could have been redonated to an area that could use it, right?
Absolutely. So this is how I'd probably go about structuring a training plan for Johnny. And look, it's not really that complicated. Tommy, oh sorry, I thought it was Johnny Stiles. I don't know why I speak Johnny Stiles anyway.
That's a different Johnny. Yeah.
Anyway, it's not really that complicated. And I think what I have seen as of late is people almost designing these crazy splits where it's like a mishmash of just all sorts of different things, which in my opinion doesn't really make sense. Like, there's only so much variations of training you can do. And it's like every single training method, every single exercise, it's all already been done. We cannot invent something new when it comes to training. We literally cannot. It's just not possible. It's been done over and over in the past 40, 50 years. So when people try to come out with these novel, theories or novel training splits, it's like, all that shit, my friend, has been done. You're not talking about anything new. You're just regurgitating what someone already has said, right?
Absolutely.
So I think, yes, you can get pretty specific with stuff, but at the same time, you have to remember, it doesn't have to be complicated. It still needs to be simple enough, and it needs to be strategic. It needs to be done in a fashion where your athlete can recover from it, and it needs to be done in a fashion where he is able to follow it consistently over time with no deviation.
Yeah. All right. So I've got something going a little bit different direction for this next guy. And I believe he's actually a client of yours because we have Chris Anderson in the live stream. He says, that's my coach right there. And he also sent us in pictures. So this will give you an opportunity to tell us what he is doing and why you have him doing it.
Let's go.
All right.
Chris Anderson. I'm not coaching this geezer.
No.
No.
Maybe a different Chris Anderson then.
Yeah, it looks great though, but I'm definitely not coaching this one.
All right. A lot of Chris Andersons out there. I thought we were on to something pretty cool where I was going to get to hear what you were already doing. All right.
No, I'm not coaching this one, but he actually has got a good physique.
Oh, he said Tommy was his coach. I gotcha.
Okay.
All right. We were talking about his coach. All right. That makes sense.
Right.
So I'm not sure what you want to see first. I can change where these are at, though, but these are the pictures that he gave us. So I'll start out
perfect,
like
man.
this. All right.
Right. Let's get into it. Now, standout body parts to me, Scott. Quads.
Yeah, dude, those quads are nuts.
Quads are absolutely tremendous. Now, when we look at his side shots, let's have a look at his side shots. His hamstring in the side. Yeah, hamstring could do anything coming up, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
All right.
So, physique analysis. What does he need now to improve? First and foremost, he's going to need very little volume for his quads. So that's straight away out of the way. So in terms of a training split, what I would go for him would be a 5-day split. And what I would actually like to go with would be push, pull, legs, just a straight push, pull, leg split. However, on the leg day, he would only have 3 direct working sets for his quads. He would have potentially a leg extension and one set of either leg press or a squat pattern of his choice. 3 working sets. I can probably imagine this geezer trains hard. You can just tell.
Yeah.
So 3 working sets would be a bit of a baseline. Now, what I also like to do that I forgot to mention is, generally, I would like to start with volume that I know is going to be pretty moderate. I know it's going to be volume that can potentially be moved upward depending on the recovery of the athlete. In some instances, you may need to lower it, but again, you would start them off with somewhat moderate volume where it's somewhere in the middle of not high, but not too low. Then you would assess and see what the recovery is like, see what the progression is like, and go up or down. So push-pull legs, push day, I would do an even push day, to be honest. He doesn't really have, with his upper body, I wouldn't really say that his chest is necessarily smaller than his shoulders, same with his tricep. I think he just lacks overall development of his upper body, and he is pretty balanced. So I would just have a balanced push day where it would be something like 4 working sets for his shoulders, 4 working sets for his chest, 4 working sets for his tricep. And the way I would structure that would be 3 compound exercises. So 2 chest, either a flat or a low incline, followed by an incline or a high incline press. And then the third compound movement for the push day would be either a narrow grip press or a dip. Then it would be 2 chest isolation exercises and 2 tricep and 2 shoulder isolation exercises. So total of around 4, 8, 12 working sets, potentially a little bit more, depending on what he can actually tolerate. So that would be the start point. Same for the pull day. I don't think there's anything there that's lacking. He could do with a little bit more lower lat, but to be honest, in an instance like this, I wouldn't say to him, one specific area of your back is lacking.
Yeah.
He just simply needs more mass across his entire back.
Yeah.
So I would probably shoot for 8 to 10 working sets for his pull day, with 2 working sets for his rear delts and 4 working sets for his biceps, which would be a total of 14 to 16 sets. Leg day. This is where it's going to get a little bit more specific. I would definitely go with 2 sets of adductors directly to begin with, because when you look at his back shot, his adductor is definitely lacking quite a lot alongside of his hamstring.
Okay.
There's a little bit of a gap between his legs, right?
Yeah, I see it.
I would like that filled in on the back double.
Okay.
So 2 sets of adductor work. Then I would probably go with 4 sets of hamstring work. On this day, I would not do any hip hinges for him because I would like to add a hip hinge on another day. So on this day would be 2 working sets of adductor, 4 working sets of hamstring work, and 3 working sets of direct quad work. And that would be a total of, 9 working sets plus calves, so around 11 working sets for the leg day.
Okay.
Then it would be a rest day. Follow that on with another push day, and again, I would have that spread even. Then I would go with a pull day. However, on that day, this is when I would probably do 7 total working sets of his back work, and I would actually add a very, very hamstring dominant hip hinge at the very end, which is going to directly train his hamstrings and glutes, but also add in some erector work to fill out that erector in the lower back.
Okay.
Then again, a little bit of rear delts and bicep to finish off on. So I would structure it in a fashion where I wouldn't have him start with the hip hinge. I would have him do all his lat work and upper back first. Then at the end of the back work, I would have him do 1 to 2 working sets of the hip hinge, then finish off on rear delts and bicep.
Okay.
What's your thoughts on that?
I think that sounds great to me, man. And I agree. I think that just looking at his physique, quads are phenomenal. And you know, it's a standout body part for him. I'm imagining to myself, oh my God, what would this guy look like if he brings the hamstrings up to the quality of his quads, if he brings his upper body up? I don't see any aspect of his back where I'm like, you know, this particular spot's lacking. I really just think it's a matter of just continuing. And he looks fairly young. Like he's got years left, you know, so I think he can make a lot of really good progress. I have a question for you though. Let me ask you. So you can see so far, looking at both of these guys, they you can tell they put in hard work. They both are what I would call to be advanced. Now, what if you take somebody who isn't as capable of generating the intensity that I already know these two guys can generate. Let's say somebody who's more of a novice, are you still going to put them on, say, the same amount of like moderate to lower volume per exercise, or how would you take into account for that?
One variable that's overlooked, when someone is a complete novice, they don't have much muscle. They don't need much volume or much intensity to actually grow because it's all novel. Almost anything that they do will stimulate a degree of growth.
Yeah.
However, if someone is legit going in the gym and they are like 5, 6, 7 reps away from failure, then they will struggle. In that instance, I think even throwing more volume at them is just not going to lead to any growth. So I understand the argument that people have where they say, right, if someone's a novice, they need more volume. But I also understand that when someone is a novice, they simply do not require as much volume to see the growth. As you get bigger, your volume demand to see continuity in growth increases. However, the volume demand isn't just the number of working sets. The volume would be the strength. You need to lift heavier to see you bridge past that gap and see that volume increase. So volume isn't just sets. Volume is proximity to failure. It's range of motion. It's tempo. So I would probably urge any novice to really look at the training, set them up with a relatively low volume training program, because realistically, if you give a novice a ton of volume, all they will then do is continue going to the gym and going through a cycle and repeating just shit volume, shit sets.
Saving it for the next, they know they have, a dozen more sets to do, so I better not go all out right now.
Exactly that. Whereas if you try and educate them in a fashion where, right, you go in the gym, you have 2 opportunities with that exercise, 2 sets, or even 1 working set. I want you to go as hard as you can whilst staying safe. Don't hurt yourself. And realistically, because novices are super weak, they're not very strong. It's going to be very hard for them to hurt themselves anyway. Like, I'm not joking, Scott. Like,
well, as long as they use good form, right? Because there's also the aspect
absolutely.
of I pulled my neck while I was trying to bench press.
Yeah. But even with novices that use bad form, because they are so weak, it's very hard for them to hurt themselves. And the reason why I even say that is because before I actually started coaching full time, I PT'd for like 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
And the stuff that I used to see in the gym is just crazy. With PTs telling the clients to do like ridiculous stuff that I was watching them. I was like, I am so happy that you are so weak that you cannot literally shit your vertebrae out, because you are literally on the verge of tearing something badly where you're probably going to be in a wheelchair. Anyway, back to the topic. When someone is so weak, it's hard for them to hurt themselves. So I would encourage them to train harder and push themselves to that limit while still staying safe and trying to stay accurate. But there is a balance. You are not going to expect a beginner to even know what accurate is, because they don't have not only the knowledge, but unless there was a professional athlete beforehand, or even an athlete at a high level in any other sport, they won't have the understanding of what bracing is, of what the simple things are, like even keeping stability. Like, they won't know where the body is in space. It's much harder for them to grasp training, right?
Yeah.
So it's a tough one. I would still lean on the side of, if someone's a beginner, they probably need a complete beginner. Like, within the first 3 months of training, they probably need full body workouts quite frequently, like full body every other day. If someone is past like a 6-month mark, and again, this is where Jordan speaks about this a lot, upper lower. If someone's past like 6 months and they're already getting somewhat proficient at lifting, the training is getting effective, they somewhat know what they're doing, I would still opt for higher frequency, moderate to low volume with upper lower.
Yeah.
Then when someone gets a little bit more advanced, at a year, 1-2 years into the training, then you can push that into a push-pull leg or variations of push-pull leg. Like, if someone wants an arm day in, give them one. If it's going to make them happy, just give them one. As long as 90% of the programming is still structured and geared towards the goals and progression they need to be making.
Okay. I like it. I like
That's
it.
where I'm at with it.
I like that answer, and it's something that I think, for myself and a lot of other people, everybody seems to be coaching right nowadays online, and being able to try to get that message through to help people get to the point where they're improving. It can be a challenge when we have the barrier of the internet. We're not in there in person to say, this is how you do a bench press,
Yeah, I agree. I think it helps if you do like a form analysis, but I still,
Sure.
if I do have an opportunity for a client to actually go and have an in-person session with someone, I encourage them to do so.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
Always. Because you cannot learn true intensity training by yourself. You need quite literally someone to show you not only what you're capable of, but show you in person what hard training is by actually leading by example, right?
Agreed 100%, man. All right, we got a bunch more here. So this is Tanya Miller. She's one of our longtime listeners, and she works with Broderick on his team, writing for him and stuff. Let's see if I can grab her back shot here. I think she's got a side shot here too. And I don't believe she's competed yet, but her goal is to build a physique that she's confident with winning a show with.
Yeah. Oosh. Very good. Very, very good. Right. Very nice. Now, let's break this down, right? She's definitely got great delt development. I will give her that. Her side delt is definitely on point there, right? So we can definitely agree that from a needs analysis standpoint of what she actually needs, it's going to be quad development, hamstrings, and back. So in Tanya's instance, I would honestly have to go with an upper lower split.
Okay.
And let me give him a reason for that. She is at a point where she's almost getting to that point where she's getting advanced. However, when you look at her physique, you have got some strong points, but also I would probably say big weak areas that I think need a lot of attention. And in her case, it is her back and it is her lower body to a degree. So an upper lower split here would be ideal because she gets a chance to train her upper every 3 days and her lower every 3 days. So the way I would structure this would be both upper body days would be geared towards her back training. I would have 6 to 8 working sets per upper body session on her back. On the day where she does the delts, and she would only have, out of her 2 upper body days, she would only have 2 working sets of delt work in one of the upper body days. The second upper body day would be all back work.
Okay.
When it comes to arm development, I don't think she needs much arms, to be honest, especially for figure, which that is the poses for figure. She has got heels on as well, so I assume she wants to do figure.
Yeah.
She would only need 2 working sets of bicep and 2 working sets of tricep directly in one of the upper body days. So the way I would structure this would be this. Upper one, which would be 6 working sets of back, 2 working sets of delts. This is the day where I would actually do arms. 2 sets of bicep, 2 sets of tricep. So that takes us to 12 working sets. Not that demanding, because again, a lot of the movements are going to smaller movements and isolation exercises, especially last 3 exercises. So you would do 1 exercise for delts, 1 exercise for bicep, 1 exercise for tricep, and then potentially 2 or 3 exercises for her back in that session.
Okay.
In that session, I would probably do 2 lat movements and 1 upper back movement. And again, it would be a chest supported movement because she is training her lower body the following day. Lower body 1 would be a quad dominant leg day. 8 to 10 working sets, probably leaning towards 8 working sets, where it would be 2 hamstring sets, direct work. Again, a seated hamstring variation or a lying hamstring variation. Then follow that up with 6 working sets of direct quad work. I would have probably a leg extension. And in this session, I would probably go all leg press. So the session structure would be smaller, where she'd have a hamstring variation, a leg extension, a leg press, taking that up to 8 total working sets, and some calf work, 10 working sets.
Okay.
The second upper body day, this would be literally just a back day. I would literally do 8 working sets for back, 2 working sets for rear delts in that day. That's it.
Okay.
And I would split that between 3 to 4 working sets for lats, 3 to 4 working sets for upper back, depending on her volume tolerance, if she can handle 8 working sets. Which 8 working sets, I think, every 3 days, 8 to 6 working sets, is very much doable on her back days. The second actual leg day, second lower body day, this is where I would actually opt for a hip hinge and a pendulum squat variation. So the way I would rock and roll with this session would be 2 working sets of hamstring curls. Again, any variation of her preference. Always start with hamstrings, in my opinion. That's a tip from John Meadows to warm the knee joint. Then I would go with 2 working sets of a hip hinge variation she enjoys, RDL or a strict SLDL. In her instance, I would lean more towards the RDL. 2 working sets of a pendulum squat, and then I would probably go with 1 or 2 working sets of leg extension if she can handle them. So 4 working sets of hamstrings in the session, potentially 5, increasing that hamstring volume through the leg curl up to 3 working sets. And now I would go with probably 1 to 2 working sets of pendulum and 1 to 2 working sets of leg extension and 2 sets of calves. That is exactly how I would structure her training. And again, this is suited to her physique development, her needs, and the category that she's competing in.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on that?
It sparks a question, and this is more of a general question for any of our female listeners. I have met a lot of women. When I say a lot, I'll say more than 2. You know, it's been a reoccurring theme. I've met women who don't train chest, especially women with implants. Like, I don't need to train chest. Can you share with us your thoughts on just that idea as a whole?
I don't think they need like a pec fly variation. However, an overhead press variation I think would come in handy. And the main reason why I would program in an overhead or high incline press variation is most of the function. You want to be strong, but you also want to be functional. If you are not doing these movements, you are probably not as functional as you could be or as you should be. However, I don't think unless you are a WPD competitor or a women's bodybuilder, I do not think you actually need direct chest work as such.
Yeah, I could go with that.
In my opinion.
I could go with that. Yeah, you don't need a lot. I have seen it situationally where it just makes sense. My advice to anybody would be, I wouldn't write it off completely. I'd at least question it, you know?
Yeah. I would at least program in maybe like a high incline press.
And I do like that. Somewhere. I like that thought too, you know, the functionality aspect of it. All right, let's see what else we got here. These are kind of all filtered throughout my normal email. We got Andrew is with us. Let's see, Andrew. Okay, so Andrew, Ghost 824 is a guy from Australia. Let's see. Here's a back shot. I'll throw this up first. Big files. All right.
Oosh.
And I've got more of them, but I'll just start out because of the way they're filling the screen. I'll send you the front and rear double. We'll start there.
Yeah.
So I'm going to bring that up a little bit. There we go. And let me see what else we have here too.
I think it definitely looks like it's got a big chest.
Yeah.
Good chest, good quads.
Here's a side chest. See if I can squeeze the 3 of these in here next to each other.
Yeah. Hamstrings are definitely a weakness, my friend.
Try something
Right.
like that. All right. And he also, I think, had a rear lat spread and a front lat spread. So.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. All right.
Now, I will give him a training split. If he wants specific movements, he can actually use them from what I have gone over in previous setups. That would be easy for him to put it together. But looking at this lad here, and I want you to give me your thoughts on this, because I am generally not a massive fan of arm days. However, in this instance, I think it's needed.
Okay.
Because he does have a quite well-developed chest, well-developed shoulders.
And back,
his
too.
His back actually looks pretty big.
Yeah.
However, the hamstrings are lacking and arms are lacking. So the way I would structure it would be a push day, a pull day again, and I would do no arms on the pull day. It would be, again, a back and a hamstring day. So push, back and hamstring. Then I would actually go with a full-on arm day. So push, back and hamstrings, and then it would be arms. And then I would go with a leg day. Okay. So if his recovery is fantastic, he could do it in a fashion of 4 days on, 1 day off, quite low volume, higher frequency where it goes push, back hamstrings, arms, legs, rest, repeat. Or if he needs more time and more recoverability, I would go with push, back and hamstrings, rest, arms, legs, rest, repeat. However, if he opts for lower volume approach, which would be my preference here, with higher frequency, I really think he could work with push, back and hamstrings, arms, legs, rest, repeat. And the way I would probably structure it would be 10 to 12 working sets per session at a maximum.
Okay.
Potentially even less. So he could do with potentially 10 working sets for a push day. And again, on that push day, I'd probably do 2 working sets for tricep. It would be 4 working sets for chest, 2 working sets for shoulders, and then potentially like an extra compound movement that ties in both chest, shoulders, and tricep, and then 2 working sets for the tricep isolation work, which would take up to 10 working sets. Then I would go with the back and hamstring day. It would be 6 working sets for back overall, 4 working sets for hamstrings, and it would be a hip hinge variation in there out of the 2 working sets of the 4 working sets for hamstring work. Then rest. Arms, I would probably go for 10 working sets total, keeping the quality nice and high.
Mm-hmm.
Then for leg day, I would probably go with 3 to 4 working sets for hamstrings, only hamstring isolation work. And then I would probably go with some compound work for quads. And I would probably go with 4 direct working sets for quads and 2 direct sets for the adductor and finish off on calves. So that leg day potentially would be 10 to 12 working sets. What's your thoughts on that?
I like that. Yeah, I can see for sure hamstrings, hams and arms both. I mean, his back is really a standout body part for him. And overall, I think that his shape up top from the front looks really good. I think overall, he could use legs in general. So I like where you're coming from. And you know what, even on that compound work on the quad day, it's not like you're not getting hams on that day as well,
Yeah.
I'd be curious to see.
Isolation work on that day as well.
Yeah.
So he still got 4 working sets of hamstring work, just isolation work on that leg day. So his hamstring frequency would be much higher, but obviously keeping the compound work with the pull day.
Yeah. I'd be really curious. This would be a really cool experiment to see what he could do with his arms in, say, 6 months. Because, arms are a smaller body part. And you can, I think that you can make faster progress. There's less tissue overall in, a rear delt or in a tricep. So versus something like a hamstring, that's going to be a long-term project. I mean, you can make really good progress in a year, but there's a lot of tissue to add in there. Just like a back, to grow a back can take time. But in arm, I feel like 6 months from now, he could have the arms up with the right setup. So I'd be curious to see how that works for him.
I completely agree. I think picking exercises that he can really, really connect with well as well on arms is very important.
Yeah.
So only work with exercises where you can come away from them really feeling the work done. And I wouldn't necessarily try and chase a pump. I don't think that works with any body part, but you should be coming away from your training with a big juicy pump. If you are not, you're probably not as accurate as you could be, or there could be insensitivity issues, or blah, 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 all the rest of it. Now, another little point that's worth mentioning probably, if he does experience any tendonitis pain, as I find a lot of people that do have smaller arms do experience almost a lot of connective tissue pain, right? I would probably run one of the arm days occluded, having occlusion on.
Okay. Yeah.
That way, he's forced to use less load, and I would run it sporadically, adding it in and out, just to force more so a better mind to muscle connection with the body parts as well.
Yeah. And guys, I want to mention too, we're going to have Dr. Mario Novo on the show. He was a guy who helped John Meadows with a lot of his occlusion training. So stay tuned for that, because that could be very informative to this topic specifically.
Yeah, so I would actually have him do some occlusion training, at least one of his arm days, and that would be for a purpose to give his joints a break.
Okay.
So he's forced to use less load. But also another benefit, like I mentioned, is developing a deeper mind to muscle connection, because he's going to be some pain, man. Like doing occluded training, I've never done it, but I can imagine it's probably super painful. I mean, I can get a good connection with my arms, luckily, so I don't need it. But I can imagine it's pretty damn painful when it's occluded. So that's a method that I have used in past in certain cases like this, and I think that would really work well for him as well.
I'd be interested in that. There's a lot of benefits. I can't wait to get Mario on. He's been at Swiss every time I've been there, and we've gone out to dinner a bunch of times and talked. There's just so many benefits, health benefits to occlusion training. So it's something I plan on it's one of my things I want to dive into personally this year.
I'm gonna watch it. To be honest, I do watch pretty much 99% of the podcasts anyway, so I'm definitely going to watch that one.
Well, thank you.
I walked in earlier and Meg had Dr. Scott on, because I've got Dr. Scott's nutrition timing.
Oh, okay.
I've got it saved on my to watch list, so she was watching it earlier when I walked in.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, we've got two more guys here. We'll see if we can jump through them. This is Mike. He's he's a taller guy, 6'4" at 250. Let's see, you got to open this up.
I hope people are giving you Patreon money for this, because we're pretty much giving them away some gems here.
We really are. This is great stuff. And even if we're not talking about you directly, there's just so much you can apply to your own training with everything that we're saying here. This is freaking awesome stuff, Kuba.
Mate, this is going to be an interesting one. Do you know why?
Why is that?
We've got a very much similar situation to Tanya here.
Okay.
But with a little bit more of a caveat, because he does need arms as well.
Okay. I got to kind of cover this up a little bit. I'll go right here. Something like, I've got a choice here.
Yeah, I can see that.
All right.
Listeners will see that clearly as well.
Look at that conditioning, first of all, man. He must have just competed. I wonder if you wrote that. He says these pics are from a couple days. So they're not super current. He said this is from Canadian Nationals this past year, a couple days out. He's been considering switching to a push-pull leg, but he'd never actually done it. He's doing chest and bis, squats, quads, chest and bis, quads, back, rest, delts and tris, hams and glutes, rest.
In this instance, because his lower body is lagging so much behind, I think an upper lower would be a must in this instance. Okay. However, the big difference between him and Tanya would be he would need more chest work added in there. So on the first day where we had 6 to 8 working sets of back, I would actually lower that down to probably 3 working sets of direct back work, lat work, and I would probably have 4 to 5 working sets of chest, 3 sets of lats, and then I would probably do 3 to 4 working sets of tricep isolation work as well, and potentially a compound in there. Then the leg days would look very much the same, because when you look at the lower half, very, very much similar to what Tanya has in terms of the issues and development needs. However, in this instance as well, I would add in probably more direct adductor work to fill in that gap from the back. And even you can see from his side, the hamstring really needs a lot of thickness, and leg development overall needs a lot of thickness. I mean, chest and shoulders are great. So shoulders and chest will need, I think chest will still need some love. However, shoulders, they will just need literally 2 working sets across both upper body days, and that will be on the structured in one upper body day. The second upper body day, where I would probably do 6 to 8 working sets of back, that is when I would only do 2 working sets of chest. One thing I find with upper lower is one of the upper body days needs to be more of a pec dominant day. The second day only needs a little bit of isolation work, and it cannot be much because the chest, I find, doesn't recover quite as well session to session.
Ah, okay.
I'm not sure why, but I've seen it very, very commonly where if you are pressing on a frequent basis, your pressing just goes to shit. So with an upper-lower split, especially for males, all the pressing and bulk of the work done will be done on the one upper body day. Then the second upper body day, they would literally do some higher rep work, and it would be isolation work, like a chest fly on a pec deck machine or a cable fly only. And then that day, I would have him do, again, arms, and I would have him do 2 sets of lateral work. That's it. And to be honest, with this geezer as well, he could actually do his bicep at the start of his lower body day, leaving him more volume for the upper stuff to allocate to chest, back, and tricep, and a little bit of delt, obviously. And going into the lower body days, with starting with bicep, not only it's not going to have much of a recovery demand on the leg day, but going into it fresh as exercise number 1, he will have much more power as well, and a much better connection because he's going into it fresh and not fatigued. So that's the way I would structure things for this lad here. Alternatively, you could potentially even do upper, lower, arms with a little bit of extra lat work added on there, rest, and then repeat.
Okay.
Again, it all depends on what he can actually do with his days. If he needs a fixed split, he could probably work with a push-pull legs, a straight push-pull legs, rest, and then upper-lower rest. That would be a fixed split for this lad. If he's flexible, however, I would lean more towards 2 days on, 1 day off, upper-lower split.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that. I agree. I feel like, even if he grew nothing up top this year, but he were to grow legs, it would change his physique dramatically.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
I will say too, I feel like we can only grow so many body parts at once. I think it's hard to grow everything, but if he were able to change his legs with something like this, over the course of the next year or whatever, that would be huge just in itself.
Yeah, I agree completely.
We got one more guy here, and see what we have to say about him. This is Andy, I believe. Where'd you go, Andy? All right. Get the pictures first, and I can tell you a little bit about him too. All right, give me just a second to get him sized. There we go. And I got a back shot Andy. As well. I want to know what that gun is tattooed on his pec there. That's this is my guy speaking my language here. That's what I have to say.
Well, he also has a gun right outside of him as well on his right.
Oh, he does. Good eye. Good eye. Nice. A little home protection going on there. Just got us demonetized.
He's ready.
Andy just got us demonetized, brother. No.
Really?
No, we're good. We're good.
Yeah, I hope so. Right. Andy, 2 options for you, my friend. 1 day on, 1 day off, full body, modified, where you start with upper body work to begin with, and then finish off on lower body on the first day. Second day, you flip it round, and you start with lower body work, and then you go on to upper body. Or an upper-lower split, And again, with Andy, I would not worry about specific volume allocation. Andy simply needs everything. Andy is very much a beginner. So I would spread his volume evenly across all of the body parts and focus on just trying to grow everything here and trying to just get as strong as possible, as accurate as possible, and enjoy the process as a byproduct of that as well. Because when he starts to see progress, he will get hooked. And when he starts to grow, when he starts to get stronger, he will definitely enjoy it much more. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I see he has a couple notes in here too that I think we could probably talk about. He says, I think I have he's lower crossed syndrome with tight back, loose abs, and quads. He just started seeing a pelvic floor therapist. He says, I do have degenerative disc disease of the lower lumbar. 3 herniated discs in that area. So he wanted us to let us know those things. How can he do this without getting cut, without getting injured? He says, I want to my son to stop calling me chicken legs. So what would be your thoughts on, because obviously we're all, I just was thinking about this morning, Kuba. Like, I don't care who you are. We are all working around something. Some people have more things to work around, but, even you at your level, there are things you have to work around every day, no matter what. We all have our limitations. So what, can you speak to that? You're what?
I have to work around my head, yeah. Right. Andy, you are going to have to be very careful, my friend. I would not attempt any free weight squatting or even any machine squats without hiring a PT first and learning how to execute these lifts correctly. I would also not attempt any hip hinge movements, so no deadlift variations for you, my friend, unless you hire someone that can show you how to do it safely and effectively without hurting yourself. So I would urge Andy to hire a very decent trainer to do this. Alternatively, Andy, before you attempt any of these lifts, I would want to strengthen your lower back on a machine like a reverse hyperextension. Or extension. I think most gyms do have a 45-degree hyper.
Yeah.
I would start with body weight or very, very light on a reverse hyperextension, or body weight on a 45-degree hyper on his lower body days. Then the lower body days, I would stick to leg curl variations on machines, leg extensions, and leg presses. With leg presses, generally, you cannot go wrong. As long as you don't go too deep, letting your back roll, you will be safer than trying to attempt a squat pattern. So for you, Andy, super basic, upper body work, I think you're going to be relatively safe. Stick to compound work first, because if you do isolation beforehand, especially for a beginner, I think you are going to have a much harder time trying to stabilize these movements. So start off on a Smith machine, Andy. Then, when you get good at a Smith machine, move on to barbells and dumbbells. What's your thoughts on that, Scott?
I like that. And I like what you had to say about strengthening the lower back. I used the hyperextension machine extensively, and I did this without intentionally doing it to strengthen my lower back, but I struggled with a lot of low back issues, and I never knew why, and nothing showed up on an MRI. And as I was doing the John Meadows' plans that he sent over to my training partner Shelby, we did these plans for like 4 years, and John on back day always had some type of a hyperextension at the very end, and we would use bands. So we'd use like a banded hyper, do 2 sets of 20. Maybe we'd use a plate sometimes to do it. But fast forward a year down the road, my lower back was so freaking strong. I went into it in a position where I really couldn't comfortably deadlift, but by the time I got there down the road, my lower back was incredibly strong. Plus, I actually saw like massive density. My lower back was way thicker than I ever would have thought it would have been when I got lean. So that was one part, but I would still throw my back out from time to time. And it wasn't until I strengthened my glutes. I found for me personally, my glutes were the stabilizing factor that had been missing all along. So I'd bend over to do like a barbell row, and I didn't have the stability because I was trying to just basically hold it with my lower back the whole time. Once I could get my glutes, and if I still to this day, if I coast on glute training, they don't want to activate as well, and they won't turn on to help support a bent over position. So lower body training has been incredible for helping my lower back as well. So definitely, and it didn't take a lot of weight. It's not something you have to go in there and like kill it. You just need to, it's almost like physical therapy. You need to strengthen the glutes up along with that lower back for sure,
So for you, Andy, what I would actually opt for would be, like Scott suggested, fantastic option with a 45-degree hyper doing them banded, because you do get the big deload in the stretch where you are going to be more vulnerable in the stretch. So you don't really want it that heavy in the stretch in that instance. And this doesn't mean that just because you are not loading the stretch, you won't grow. You will. I don't think it makes that much of a difference between length and loading and short and loading, as all the geek guys tend to say with the research that they do on guys that are like Andy, very much untrained guys. So Andy, another thing that I think Scott probably will agree on that I would like you to do is a hip thrust variation.
Yes, yeah.
A hip thrust variation, I think it does work magic for strengthening the entire lumbar region, because if your glutes are strong, your lower back will be supported, exactly like Scott said. So I definitely am in agreement, and a fantastic point you actually mentioned, Scott, 100% with the glute training and glute strength in general, because even when you look at Andy's pictures, I can already see with his shorts on that his glutes are very much, he needs muscle everywhere, but I can see that, he has very little glute.
You got white guy butt. You got white guy butt, Andy. That's the problem.
Yeah, basically. You've got your button backward, my friend.
And, too, I'll throw out a kudos to him getting into pelvic floor therapy. My wife, Victoria, would be thrilled to hear that. Pelvic floor stuff is such a big issue that a lot of people are unaware of. A lot of times with females, but even rare is it that a male gets involved with pelvic floor therapy. So I'm sure that's going to help him a lot,
Yeah, I think so.
All right. So that's all we got on that, Kuba. Those are, we had a bunch of them. A lot of people took part.
Yeah, man. I feel like I'm sweating here. I've got a vest on, but I'm sweating. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
I tried to make it as sharp as possible, but with stuff like this, I don't think there's a way to do it like fast. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I do apologize if that dragged on a little bit for you guys. Hopefully it hasn't, because we have probably given you a lot of different perspectives on what you can actually do with your training or even your clients' training. So hopefully you've took some value from that. But what do you want to get into, Scott?
I want to add just one more thing to that, Kuba, is that I agree, man. It was deeper, but this is something I'm going to go back and listen to, because even though I'm used to writing programs and analyzing physiques, getting to hear you do this is a special treat to me, because this teaches me. Hearing how you do this gives me perspectives that I wouldn't have thought of on a number of occasions, especially with upper body, lower body training. It's not as something that it's something I'm doing, but it's not something I am as nuanced with as you are. So there's a lot of good tips here that I picked up too. So I wanted to say thank you as well from my perspective.
Appreciate that, man. Appreciate that. I love it. I love doing it. Love doing it. So yeah, appreciate that, man.
So should we do the crazy cycles thing? I almost feel like that's a topic of its own. We could do it, and we can't title it Craziest Cycles, though. That's the only thing, because we already did this. You know what I mean? But we did promise them, so we should at least give them one crazy cycle, and then maybe come back, and then in the future we could do an episode titled Craziest Cycles, and then of course that's going to get way more hits than how to actually train and grow muscle.
Absolutely. Now, I definitely think that's a full episode for the crazy cycles, but do you wanna go with yours and save mine for the full picture, because mine is definitely the juicy one, isn't it? Well, saying that, yours is also juicy, but I
can't really share this one so much, but I did I did see a cycle recently that was literally like 5 grams of orals, like per wild, man.
I have seen some crazy cycles. I think there's probably a few that I can share. I do have another one that I probably can share right now before we get stuck into the other one. But I have seen firsthand people quite close to me and especially in British industry at a point where it wasn't uncommon to see, upward of gram of test, 1400 trenbolone. That would be 200 milligrams of trenbolone per day. And then, a gram of DHT was, I think it was like Mastron, a gram of Mastron. And then it was, I think, total, it will have been 700 milligrams of orals. So you're looking at 1, 2, 3.5 grams of oils plus 700 milligrams of orals total. That takes it up to, 4 and a bit grams. And that was a very, very similar cycle from one of world-renowned coaches that I have seen emailed over to one of my friends. The coaches, yeah. I'm not going to name no names. We don't do that, and we would never get involved in anything like that. But it's you see almost like a spreadsheet with a set cycle for that time frame. That's what you take, and then it kind of shifts with another one and another one, and it kind of just chops and changes with the compounds. So, yeah, I have seen some crazy ones, and one of my close friends, and I did coach him in past as well. He was pretty adventurous when it came to cycles, and when I coached him, Scott, and that's a different person, by the way. That's not someone who actually took that cycle. That's a different person. Talking of juicy cycles, when I coached him, I remember I used to give him specifically lower doses because I knew he would probably double it.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if I work with people like that, but I knew it. And he was in a recovery phase post-show, and that was some years ago now. And I gave him a post-show cycle, and I knew that he wouldn't take proper TRT. So it was 400 milligrams total, and I knew that if I give him some higher growth hormone, he will be fine with that, and hopefully he'll take it because, I'm giving him a trade-off where your anabolics will be lower, but your growth hormone will be higher.
Yeah.
So it was like 400 mgs of total anabolics. It was like 300 test and 100 mgs of Primo, I think it was.
For the cruise phase, you're saying? For the
cruise.
Yeah.
The cruise. Which is, for bigger guys, it's probably a normal cruise anyway.
Right.
But I said to him, look, I want you to take a little bit less this time, but you can have a little bit extra growth. So let's do your growth at 12 IUs per day.
Okay.
So he actually did a YouTube. He did a YouTube like 2 weeks later talking about his cycle, and it wasn't 400 mgs. It was a gram.
Did he think you were not going to watch it or something?
I think he did, yeah.
You needed to tell him like 150, and then he'd be like, okay, then I'll go to 5 or 6.
It was a gram of test and like 15 IUs of GH. I was like...
He couldn't even stick with the 12 IU. Oh, man.
Bro, come on.
Yeah.
You're going to have to work with me here. But yeah, safe to say, after a while, I just thought to myself, I'm not going to facilitate that anymore and work with you, geezer, because I care about you and I don't want to see you hurt yourself. So if you're not going to listen to me, and I'm going to try and do as much damage limitation as I could.
Yeah.
If you're not going to listen to it, I can't do it, my friend, because I don't want to see anyone hurt themselves. So, yeah.
Yeah. But
we can get into some juicier topics as well, and juicier cycles in a full video next time.
That sounds good, man.
I do have one that comes from an ex-Olympian coach, and they have coached Olympians for many, many years, and they have had teams of athletes under them. And when I saw the cycle sent over to me, I was like, is this per week or per day? And it was per day.
Yeah, when you have to ask that.
That's when you know. That's when you know it's like, if it was per week, it still would be a hefty,
You're kidding
a hefty
me.
do. But, yeah.
So we're talking grams. You're talking. Sounds like you're talking in grams to me. Then that's incredible, man.
I'm talking definitely some grams. Yeah.
I'll see if I can do some digging around. I'll see what I can dust off the memory banks. I've probably tried to block out some of the stuff I've heard over the years, but I'm sure I can pull something out of the cobwebs as well.
Yeah, we'll have to get on the juicy topics. Do we have any Q&As that are interesting?
I think we might have only had one. We didn't ask people for questions in the last episode, so I do want to throw this out there to you guys. Comment with questions on the episode. We had one about...
What we can do, guys, as well, for those of you that support the channel, support Scott, we can do an in-depth Q&A as well if you ever wish us to do so. So if you do have some great questions that you want us to answer in detail, we're more than happy to do that in a full-on Q&A episode as well.
Well, thank you, Kuba. I appreciate that, man. I appreciate you supporting us here. It means a lot to me, man. We do have one from Ghostman824, who we looked at his pictures earlier. Hopefully he grows his arms in this next 6 months, man. I want to see those arms come up. He says, I'd like you to cover sodium-potassium ratio that he hits, and is fiber counted as carb total, and what's your daily macros now? We didn't get the Kuba update today about where you're sitting weight-wise and how everything's going.
We can do that. We can do that in the juicy episode, maybe.
Okay.
But, right, let's get into the sodium potassium. I'm not sure about you, Scott, but I personally do not like messing around with potassium, especially, and it's something that's very popular at the moment. I think people overlook it. If someone is using telmisartan, I don't think they should be adding any extra potassium.
Great point.
Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit, Scott? Because I think that's a serious point that people overlook.
I'll just add this, man. I through all of my years, I never needed to modulate potassium in any way. I have heard people talking about it more recently than I had in the past, and I think that in general, it's not easy to OD on potassium the way they have it dosed, but at the same time, yeah, you got to look out for things like medications that might throw off your balance. And, people are using more and more ancillary drugs nowadays, and they feel like they're just completely innocuous. Yeah. And we don't necessarily need to do everything that we're doing to, affect our cholesterol, things to control blood pressure when you didn't even have blood pressure issues to begin with,
I do use a little bit of potassium in prep, because I do find that when you are in prep and your food is lowered and your carbohydrates are lowered,
okay,
I think your salt intake can actually increase in prep.
Yeah.
However, in an off-season setting, my salt intake significantly reduces. I literally have 6 grams of salt daily, no more.
Yeah.
And that is pretty much it. So in prep, I will go up to like 12 grams, because I do think your sodium intake even needs, when you use stuff like clenbuterol, you're sweating more, you're drinking more water, you have less food. I think you can afford to bump up your sodium a little bit higher, but a consideration you have to make is this. In an off-season setting, if you are taking in a ton of salt, you probably will retain even more water, because you are already taking in a huge amount of carbs. More carbs you eat, to a degree, more water you will hold as well, especially when your glycogen stores are full, you're in a calorie surplus, you're eating, 500, 600, 700, 800 grams of carbs, 900, even in some cases, 1,000 grams of carbs. If you're combining that with 12, 15 grams of salt per day, you are just going to be a water balloon. And I've seen it with clients before. It's like, I'm watching their blood pressure readings, and I'm like, this is trending a little bit too high. Let's measure your salt intake.
Yeah.
And it's like 20 grams of salt a day.
Yeah.
I'm like, right, let's cut that down to 8. And all of a sudden, they probably drop like 2 pounds of water.
Easy.
The blood pressure's back in check. Yeah, the blood pressure's back in check. They feel better. They sleep better. It's like you don't need as much salt intake when your food is higher. As your food, that's a rule of thumb. Not all cases. There's some outliers, different instances. But as a rule of thumb, as your carbohydrates increase, as your food comes up, your salt intake, in my opinion, can be reduced directly. Another consideration is condiments.
Yeah.
Some condiments, especially something like Frank's Red Hot Sauce, whatever they are loaded with sodium. If you're using a lot per day, your sodium intake might be getting higher from that. So you may not even need any direct salt if you're using a lot of these condiments. That's my take on sodium. And I don't think most people need to fuck around with potassium at all. Extra potassium anyway. I don't think there's a need for that.
12. So you said 12 grams of sodium. What kind of water intake do you have?
In prep, like 7-8 liters.
Okay.
Even now, it's like 6 a minimum, 7 liters.
Okay. Yeah, because there's
Yeah,
the direct relationship to sodium in water. The more sodium you're eating, the more water you need to flush that out and keep your balance. But
yeah,
given your size, it's just interesting to me. 12 grams is a good place for you. I would say for like a 200-pound guy, if he starts going up above 6 or 7, he starts holding more. You get a film. There was a time I used to think like, oh, there's no top limit. And it's kind of what you're saying, guys, on 20 grams. There's no top limit. You just keep eating it. Use as much salt as you like. And then I find a guy's using 10 grams. It happened to me twice that we're getting closer to the show, and I'm like, I can't figure this guy out. I can't get. He looked good, but he's just kind of. It's 3 times now actually because I had a guy do it last year. I can't get him looking dry and sharp the way I want. And then we look at the sodium, and that's the answer. The first time I got it wrong, man. I mean, the guy looked good. He was doing junior nationals in men's physique. He looked good, but I knew he could freaking look better. And it wasn't until after the show he told me just how much sodium he didn't know.
wow.
He didn't understand what he was doing. He figured it out after, and he said, "Oh, so would this make a difference?" And it was from that point forward, if I see that look, I can call it and say, "Hey, how much sodium do you have?" And it's happened twice since. And it's really at that last, that last bit, just really trying to get us peeled, that dry, hard, grainy look that we want. Too much salt can definitely take away if you aren't drinking enough water to flush it. And then we start limiting water to a degree, no matter where you're at in prep, usually.
Yeah, I think so. Now, just a reference point, Scott. Right now, my salt intake is like 6 grams per day. That's
Okay.
including my condom. So because my off season obviously is taking off now, my food's higher, like eating 900 grams of carbs, 800, 900. My salt intake is dramatically lower because my salt needs are just much lower in an off season.
Okay.
In prep, as food comes down, as my water intake comes up, that's when I tend to increase my salt intake a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. It helps to make you feel more satisfied too, food wise.
Absolutely, absolutely.
All right, I got to ask you, what are you weighing now, Kuba?
Let's get it. Let me get my scale up. So this week's average is 273.8.
All right. I can't remember
So
where
we're
you
up
were
and
last
rolling.
time, but I think you were in the 260s last time a month ago,
Two,
6 weeks ago.
258, I think it was. 258,
Was it
something like that, yeah.
258? Okay.
258, 260 maybe, yeah. Something like that, yeah. So it's a decent chunk of progress made, my friend.
Hell yeah.
Still not fat, still moving forward. I
Nice.
think we'll do a bit of an update next show, but it's by far the most conditioned I've been at this body weight. I mean, still got vascularity in my legs, still
Nice.
got faint vascularity in my abs sometimes, so it's not. I'm definitely not soft at this body weight, which is a massive, massive, massive shift because the last time I came anywhere near this body weight, I was pretty chubby. I'm not gonna lie.
That sounds like good progress then. We had one come up in the live stream. Why is the low carb, high protein, moderate fat diet frowned on when bodybuilders were coming up in the 70s and while bodybuilders in the 70s and 80s followed it with success?
Since when is it frowned upon?
I don't know.
Is it frowned upon?
So he's saying that low carbs, high protein, moderate fat, that diet is frowned upon. That sounds kind of like the modified keto diet.
Yeah, I don't think it is. I think ultimately, if someone prefers to diet that way, then yes. But it's not frowned upon. It's just that I do believe that carbohydrates are a much better source of fuel for training performance.
Yeah, yeah,
So if you want to stay big and strong, I think you probably need to prioritize your carbohydrate intake to a degree. You still need a good, healthy amount of fat, but I don't think fat intake needs to be high
yeah, yeah.
unless, even in natural athletes, I mean, you are going to get to a point where everything's low to get in shape. So, my preference is to definitely keep carbohydrates higher, especially around the workout window. Now, another misconception, and that's me working with a lot of natural athletes, seeing a lot of blood work, is that keeping somewhat higher fat is going to help the hormone function. When they get lean, let me tell you one thing. Doesn't matter whether you have high carb, low carb, higher fat, no carb. the hormones will be tanked no
Oh
matter
yeah.
what as they get lean. So the structure doesn't matter. That's it. It's more so how lean someone is and how severe the calorie deficit is as well.
And he
I
said
don't think that's the
diet to
only point.
build. Just throw it in there. Diet to build and maintain muscle. That's his goal.
Yeah, if you want to diet and build and maintain muscle, I think to what degree? Like you'll probably do a good job with moderate protein, moderate fat, and lower carb, but you would probably do better with slightly higher carb and some sort of carb cycling where you have your carbohydrates higher on the training day and lower on your rest day with potentially a little bit more fat on the rest day. That's my preference, to be honest. I think you would do better having a little bit more carbohydrates, especially around the workout window when dieting or trying to build muscle or trying to retain muscle for that matter.
Yeah. It's an easier energy source to use too. They didn't know as much back in the 70s and 80s either, though, as we do now. Could you do it? Yeah, you could do it. But like you said, wouldn't be my ideal. Got one more there from.
Also,
Oh, go ahead.
I believe that fat actually stores as fat much easier as well, because for your carbohydrates to store as fat, your body needs to be first fully glycogen loaded, and then you'll see some of that spillover be stored as energy, right? With fat, sometimes if you're a calorie surplus, it's much easier for your body to store fat as fat. With protein, on the other hand, it's very, very hard for your body to actually store protein as fat.
True.
There's so many different processes your body has to go through for protein to be stored as fat. So, yeah, I would probably lean into keeping protein higher. If you want to just stay lean, I would probably go with like moderate fat intake, moderate carbohydrate, and probably higher protein.
Yeah. All right. How about this one? He says, currently in a health phase before going into show prep, 150 test, 150 primo. I'm finding recovery taking much longer between sessions. Would you lower training volume?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Also, I would potentially lower the primo and increase the test. Keep the cycle the same, the dosage, the overall dosage, but to me, it probably sounds like his estrogen might be a little bit too low with that sort of split. 150 primo, 150 test. If your estrogen is tanked through that cycle design, you may potentially be leaving yourself in a poor spot to recover all that well. So before you actually change or reduce your volume,
Yeah,
maybe check your blood work.
I like that.
If you don't want to check your blood work, if you've got poor sex drive, clicky joints, I would say probably lack of motivation, poor mood, even feeling slightly depressed, your estrogen might be tanked, my friend.
There's no excuse, Kuba. If he's in the U.S., dude, we can get a la carte labs now for like $10 to check estrogen.
Wow.
Like $10.
Wow.
Get it done today.
Right.
Get your results by tomorrow, the next day.
No excuse, lad. Get your bloods done.
$10. Come on.
And if your bloods come back and they're all good, I would potentially look at lowering training volume and potentially even increasing training frequency to keep the quality of the training volume high.
Oh, and we had a critique on the show too, so I figured I'd share that with you, Kuba. He says, I think he's a director. He says, the video looks better for mass media if Kuba moved the camera up and pointed the camera down while wearing a brighter colored shirt and an angle that makes him look bigger.
Thanks, mate. I'll take that on board.
I'll email it to you so you can take note of that. Brighter colored shirt. You don't look big enough, Kuba. Your traps.
Switch the camera.
Yeah.
I just start posing now. And
Yeah. No shirts. We got to oil up. Kuba, did you pump up before this episode?
No, it's just probably all the growth.
We got to pump up before each episode, get the oil out and all
That's
that.
it.
I'm just giving the guys some crap. We appreciate your feedback. I think you look freaking huge, though. Your neck is wider than your head right now, so there's that. And if a guy's neck is wider than his head, that's usually a sign that they're pretty big.
We're on track. We're on track, Scott. We're on track. We're on track to be semi-big now.
All right. So what's going on? Anything you want to tell the people about? Anything else they should go check out?
All good, man. All good. If you want to check me out on YouTube. Check me out on my Instagram. And yeah, I will be visiting Scott again soon and getting into some juicy topics and a bit of an off-season update as well. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with you all.
Any chance you're coming to the Arnold? Any chance at all?
No,
Okay.
I'm still going to be the thick of it.
Oh,
I am
yeah,
going to Colombia. However, I am going to Colombia next month for some stem cells.
Oh, no kidding. What are you getting done?
I've actually had them done 2 years ago already.
Okay.
I had the IV, but this year I'm going to go and I'm going to basically get a scan and just say, look, if there's anything that you can see on the scan, just get it, put it in there. Believe it or not, Meg had, I forgot the name of it. It's a very weird name. Basically, she had almost bone on bone of her knees.
Okay.
She had no cartilage left. She had stem cells 2 years ago. After 12 months, she was able to train. And she was able to actually squat properly, train legs properly. And yeah, she ended up making crazy progress with lower body after having stem cells. So this place that I'm going to are definitely good. So I am reinvesting back into my health.
Good.
To make sure that I can keep doing this for a little bit longer. So stem cells next month and hopefully keep me nice and fresher.
Oh, you got to tell us all about that, man. I'm interested in doing it. Victoria has a colleague that does stem cells in Colombia, Dr. Khan. And I'm sure if you're not going to Dr. Khan, that you're going to somebody Dr. Khan knows, but they're doing great work down there. I talked to a friend of mine. They know him as the GOAT, Eddie Cohen. He does a lot of stem cells down there. He can't speak highly enough about how beneficial it's been for him too. I got to get down there myself, man.
Yeah, I'm going to the same place as all the UFC guys go and stuff like that. So yeah, it's good. It's cool, man.
Hell yeah. Well, guys, go follow Kuba, and thank you for sticking around watching the whole show with us. Leave us questions for the next episode. Of course, you can support the programming through Patreon. I have a link to that below. And yeah, happy to be here, man. Happy to have you back, Kuba.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, guys.